Good morning. Thanks for attending this virtual Ohigan service on this March 21st, 2021 at the Buddhist Church of San Francisco. The Higan in Ohigan means, as you know, other shore of enlightenment. Traditionally, it's a time when things are in balance. Days and nights are of equal length. The weather, for the most part, gives way to spring after the long winter and before the heat of summer. San Francisco, of course, is a little different, weather-wise at least. But as we begin to venture out of our COVID-enforced hibernation, this can be a joyful time. Northern California's rolling hills are lush and green. Wildflowers bloom along the highways and byways, even in the city. For most of the year, the hills are brown, beautiful in their own right. But currently along, say, 280 south of here, the undulating hills are bursting with new life. Also, traditionally, this is a time to reflect on the 6 paramitas, or 6 perfections: dana, giving; sila, virtue; patience, shanti; diligence, virya. Help me out here, folks. Jhana, concentration, and leading to wisdom, prajna. Today, we also celebrate Ohigan because Ohigan is celebrated twice a year during the spring and autumn equinox. Ohigan is also a time of transition. Winter becomes summer and back again in the cyclical nature of rebirth and death. Especially now, and especially poignant, Ohigan is a time to remember family and friends who have passed on. It's a time to give thought to another kind of transition from this shore of birth and death to the other shore of enlightenment. Today's service will feature Sutra chanting by Minister's Assistant Leo Ballenbaum. We will be doing the Sambujo and the Juseige. This will be followed by a Dharma talk by our own Minister's Assistant, Leo Joslin. And we will have the Gatha, Higan I. But let's begin with a group reading. Let us join together in the recitation of the 3 treasures. Hard is it to be born into human life. Now we live it. Difficult is it to hear the teachings of the Blessed One. Now we hear it. If we do not realize the truth in this life, when will it be realized? Let us reverently take refuge in the 3 treasures of truth. I take refuge in the Buddha. May we absorb ourselves in the principle of the way to enlightenment and awaken in ourselves the supreme will. I take refuge in the Dharma. May we be submerged in the depths of the doctrine and gain wisdom as deep as the ocean. I take refuge in the Sangha. May we live in harmony in the great assembly as disciples of the Buddha and be freed from all hindrances, becoming units of true accord in a life of harmony, in a spirit of universal oneness, freed from the bondage of selfishness. Even through myriad ages of kalpas, hard is it to hear such an excellent, profound, and wonderful doctrine. Now we are able to hear it and to receive it. Let us thoroughly understand the true meaning of Tathagata's teaching. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda, Namanda, Namanda.
Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, Namanda Butsu. Today we come together as Sangha to observe Ohigan. the spring equinox, when we contemplate the 6 paramitas and the other shore of enlightenment. We reverently come together in gratitude for the all-inclusive wisdom and compassion that is Amida Buddha. May the light of wisdom illuminate our hearts and minds to awaken us to our self-concern, and by this insight stir us to strive for a life of deeper understanding. May the life of compassion warm an innate humanity in our hearts, and may we truly appreciate and respect the intrinsic value and dignity of all beings. May we, who have come together today, guided by wisdom and vitalized by compassion, awaken to the Buddha Dharma and joyfully share it with others, so that we may all fulfill the ultimate meaning of life. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Bujoe midan yorai nindon joe sange Bujoe sakan yorai Nindon joy san ge Bujoe jipon yorai niundoi joy san ge Busatsu Muryo Jukyo Juseige Gangon Chosegan Hishimu Jodo Shigan Fumanzok Seifu Joshogak Gao Muryoko Fui Daiseshi Fusai Shobinge Seifu Joshogak Gashi Jobundo Yosho Chojibo Kunkyo Mishomon Seifu Joshogak Ryokujin Shonen Joe Shibongyo Shigumu Jodo Isho Tenin Shi Jinrikien 大公不所無際道少女三苦名交際集約難回避知恵見滅死根も安永息小悪道通断全宗門高僧上満足意よ自法日願世寿期天候恩不言一周解放像公正苦毒法上大師中説法師師苦空有一切物偶即是特本願念心上満得意三界を両分無下知通断未不詳願が救営力投資最小尊志願や効果大仙の感動航空書天人東内妙見何万ダブ何万ダブ何万ダブ何万ダブ何万ダブ何万ダブ願に識徳平等性際道本大心温情アンドラコ May this merit virtue be shared equally with all beings. May we together awaken the Bodhi mind and be born in the realm of serenity and joy. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, Namanda, Namanda Butsu.
Please join me in Gassho as I read the words of Shinran Shonin from Hymns of the Pure Land Masters. The ocean of birth and death, of painful existence, has no bound. Only by the ship of Amida's universal vow can we, who have long been drowning, unfailingly be brought across it. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Hello, I'm Leo Joslin, and I'm one of the minister's assistants here at Buddhist Church of San Francisco. I'd like to welcome you to our service for Sunday, March 21st. And this is our Ohigan service. Yesterday, March 20th, was the official date of the spring equinox. And at the time of the spring equinox, the sun crosses the equator. So day is equal to night in length. And so this reminds us of the harmony that's pervasive throughout nature. It reminds us of the balance in the universe. And there are some who have said that this is when we're closest to the Pure Land. Now, I don't know about that, but I think it's interesting to contemplate. And so Ohigan is a time for contemplation. It's a time for reflection, something that we can all use during these challenging and difficult times that we're living in. So Higan means other shore. And of course, we're talking about going from this shore of samsara to the other shore of nirvana or liberation, or an entire freedom from suffering. And it helps us to, I like the metaphor of crossing a river or an ocean, because I learned early in my life how powerful water can be. And so Ohigan also reminds me of my childhood. Behind my house, when I was growing up in a small town, there was a creek, a small creek, and I would frequently cross from one shore to the other by crossing the creek. It was a shallow creek, and so I could just wade across, and it wasn't a big deal. I had friends that lived on the other side of the creek, so I did this quite frequently, much to the unhappiness of my mother, because I would often come home muddy and wet. But it was a good way to learn about water, because when it stormed, I learned that I wasn't able to go into the water. After a heavy storm, the creek waters would rise, and they would rapidly roar down to their destination. And so all I could do was just go and watch the water as it roared on by. I knew that I couldn't walk into it, because I would have been in danger. It would have been life-threatening, probably, for a small child. And so I like this metaphor because it does feel sometimes like we are in raging floodwaters. And for me, it feels like that now, especially when we take a look at everything that's going on, with the pandemic. And we have the racial injustice, we have the political divisiveness, we have the economic insecurity for so many people who've lost their jobs. And we know that Asian hate crimes are on the way up. And recently we've had one of our cousin temples vandalized in Los Angeles. And just this week we've had horrific shootings in Georgia, where most of the victims were Asian women. And so these are just awful situations that we have to contend with as we manage through these floodwaters. And so I find the following teaching by Shakyamuni Buddha to be helpful. And this is from the Samyutta Nikaya, which is actually from the Pali Canon. And in this teaching, it's a very short teaching, but Shakyamuni Buddha is being interviewed, you might say, by a deva. Now, in Buddhist folklore, a deva is like an angel, a heavenly being, not quite a Buddha, but some sort of angel. And so he's questioning, he or she, or whatever a deva is, was questioning Shakyamuni. So the first question that the deva presents is, "How, dear sir, did you cross the flood?" And Shakyamuni responds by saying, "By not halting, friend, and by not straining, I crossed the flood." So the deva asks, "But how is it, dear sir, that by not halting and by not straining, you crossed the flood?" And Shakyamuni responds, "When I came to a standstill, friend, then I sank. But when I struggled, then I got swept away. It is in this way, friend, that by not halting and by not straining, I crossed the flood." So Shakyamuni does not give any further explanation, so we have to interpret this. And it can be interpreted in a number of ways. I like to place a Shin Buddhist spin on it. I like to think that when crossing the metaphoric floodwaters of delusion and suffering, that Shakyamuni knew that he couldn't stand still, or else he would sink. And he knew that he couldn't struggle, or else he'd be swept away. So that doesn't mean he doesn't do anything. What I think he did was simply let go. He let go of his ego, his self-centeredness, and he put his trust into something bigger and something beyond this worldly realm. So by letting go of his self-centeredness, he became supported by all things. He became a part of everything. And I like to look at the Nembutsu this way. So as stated by Hideo Yonezawa in his book, Awaken to Your True Self, he writes, "When I surrender unconditionally to the fact that my life is sustained by all things, that is Namo Amida Butsu, the oneness of body and mind. So here it is, knowing that my life is supported by all things, knowing that we are grasped by Amida, we can let go of our strivings and our self-centeredness and our ego selves, and we can cease to struggle. We begin to realize that Namo Amida Butsu encapsulates all of the sum teachings that we need. In the Tanisho, Shinran is quoted as saying, "In this impermanent world, like a burning house, all things are empty and vain, therefore untrue. Only the Nembutsu is true, real and sincere." So when we say the Nembutsu, we touch what is true. And I think that saying the Nembutsu is key for crossing the flood. But there's something else that Ohigan reminds us of. It reminds us of the paramitas. So it's a tradition to think about the paramitas at this time because according to legend, Bodhisattva Dharmakara became enlightened and became Amida Buddha after spending many lifetimes, countless lifetimes, practicing the paramitas, among other things. And so for those who need refreshing of the memory, the paramitas are generosity, right or ethical behavior, patience, effort, concentration, and wisdom. These 6 are known as the perfections, and there are other translations depending on the source that we refer to. Jodo Shinshu teaches me that we do not need to concern ourselves with practicing the paramitas over countless lifetimes in order to attain enlightenment because the work is already done. It's already, the paramitas are already present in the light and life of Amida Buddha. But I believe that they remain helpful for us, not so much as practices leading to enlightenment, but as reminders of how to live as Buddhists in a difficult world. And they're reminders of what we can do when we find ourselves caught up in the floodwaters of samsara. As we cross through the flood, what we can do is we can take a look around and see who else is in the water with us, and we can support each other. Let's remember the paramitas as a way of supporting each other. And one way to do so is by practicing the Jodo Shinshu pledge, abiding by the Jodo Shinshu pledge written by Monshu Koju no Tani. We'll find the paramitas there. Very briefly, let me go over the pledge. First stanza, breaking out of my shell, I will share a warm smile and speak gentle words, just like the kind Buddha. So there we have generosity. Not becoming lost in my greed, anger, and ignorance, I shall think and act with an open mind, just like the calm and peaceful Buddha. There we have right and ethical behavior. Not putting myself first, I will share in the joy and sadness of others, just like the compassionate Buddha. Not putting myself first. There we have patience. The last stanza, realizing the gift of life that I have received, and there we have wisdom. I shall strive to live each day to the fullest. There we have effort, like the Buddha who tirelessly works to liberate all. So throughout these 4 stanzas, I believe that mindful awareness or concentration runs throughout the 4 stanzas. All of the paramitas work together, supporting each other. I think that saying the Nembutsu and as gratitude rises, that the paramitas naturally arise in our hearts. And I believe that we practice them not for ourselves, but for others, to support one another. So how is this helpful during these uncertain times? How is observing Ohigan relevant to what's happening in our world right now? I think to begin with, Ohigan reminds us of truths. The truth embodied in the Nembutsu. The truths embodied in the paramitas. These truths are a source of strength. Again, the words of Hideo Yonezawa from Awaken to Your True Self, he writes, for the first time, our own life and the life that sustains us become one, and we are awakened to the oneness of body and mind. This becomes the source of our vitality. In becoming one with the power beyond the self, we receive the strength to live through anything. So I've heard it said that when we fight against something, we make ourselves weaker. But if we fight for something, we make ourselves stronger, or we get stronger, we become stronger. So if we fight against something, we become weaker. If we fight for something, we become stronger. So if we are to respond to the hatred in our world, to the hatred and violence with our own hatred and our own anger, then we're stuck in the three poisons, and that can only make us weaker. We can only become weaker. However, if we're fighting for the truth of love and compassion, the truths of the Dharma, this can strengthen us. A deep grounding in the Dharma can help us to do so. I'm suggesting that living the Nembutsu and practicing the paramitas through the Jodo Shinju pledge can be ways of grounding ourselves in the Dharma. As stated by Dr. Yanazawa, we receive the strength to live through anything. So these are some of the contemplations that come up for me during this time of Spring Ohigan. In closing, I think that the Ohigan can remind us that it's not so much about our own ego selves, it's about all of us. When we open our hearts, we can remember our interconnections. We can remember that we are truly a part of oneness, the oneness that pervades the entire universe. We can realize that we are sustained by all things. This is embodied in the Nembutsu. And this is a source of strength when we stand up against the hate and violence that we see rising around us. We can come to see the primal vow. It's like a ship that carries us over these stormy waters, taking us to the other shore. Please join me in Gasho. The ocean of birth and death, of painful existence, has no bound. Only by the ship of Amida's universal vow can we who have long been drowning unfailingly be brought across it. Namo Amida Boots. Namo Amida Boots. Namo Amida Boots. Thank you. And please be safe. Please take good care of yourselves during these trying times.
The purest time in nature's realm, in the early spring and fall. These are the days when hearts of life become one with self and all. In the spring, the gentle breezes, in its most sustaining way, lifts our longing spirits beyond the toils of life. The purest time in nature's realm, in the early spring and fall. These are the days when hearts of life become one with self and all. The autumn sky, its golden haze, in its radiant splendor, tells our searching heart the flow of nature's ways.
For today's meditative reading, let's reflect together on the golden chain. I am a link in Amida's golden chain of love that stretches around the world. I must keep my link bright and strong. I will try to be kind and gentle to every living thing and protect all who are weaker than myself. I will try to think pure and beautiful thoughts, to say pure and beautiful words, and to do pure and beautiful deeds, knowing that on what I do now depends not only my happiness or unhappiness, but also those of others. May every link in Amida Buddha's golden chain of love become bright and strong, and may we all attain perfect peace. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda, namanda, namanda. Today's announcements include a reminder that the Buddhist Church of San Francisco's book club meets every other Tuesday at 2 p.m. versus Zoom. You don't have to have read the text, but it helps. And it's just a jumping off point for a ongoing discussion about Buddhist matters. Also, the mindful meditation group meets every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Call or email the office for details and links. Next Sunday will be our annual Lady Kujo service hosted by the Buddhist Women's Association, and it will be via YouTube. Any questions? Please call or email the office. Messages are checked regularly. Special thanks to both Minister's Assistants Leo Jocelyn and Leo Balambal, to Kevin Yoza for all his patience and expertise in these online services. And thank you, our Sangha, for taking care of each other and staying connected and engaged during this time when we are all physically apart. We miss each other and hope we're all doing well. Thanks for joining here today. Please take care. This concludes this morning's service. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.